Danna Banana.
Danna Banana, good, because that extra, and I was like, I can't be Dana, but I have to check.
Yeah.
Danna Banana, that's super cute. Hi, my name is Aisha Iqbal, and I've been following you ever since I got on Instagram, like as a personal branding tool a couple of years ago. And it's because I've had a passion for teachers and teaching for as long as I can remember. And I'm blessed to I am one of 4 girls in my family, and my sisters are all in teaching in some form or fashion. So one is a vice principal in Florida. She's been in teaching her whole career. My 2 other sisters are in the administration side, kind of internationally. So it's in our line somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one. I'm in corporate America, but I've always wanted to be something or the other in education. And so when I saw your account on Instagram, it was amazing because I've known it intuitively. Speaking to my sisters, we know it intuitively that teaching is rough. And your account and your work that you're doing is pushing self-care and self-love for teachers. And I was just like, hell yeah. I was like, of course, that makes complete sense. And it was just great. And so when I was thinking,
I'm like crying right now. I'm actually crying. I don't know if you use the video for this or not, but if people are listening on audio, just so you know, I'm crying. I'm trying not to ugly cry.
I hope it's happy tears.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like it just means so much to me. It's like, that's why I started the account, because I felt like the narrative of what was trending on social media and all this stuff with teachers, it was either the narrative of a Pinterest perfect teacher, of this teacher who has it all together. In my eyes, to me, that's Miss Honey in Matilda. She just was the teacher who just had it together. And so it's like, I see teachers on social media, oh my gosh. And I never felt like that. I never felt like I was the teacher that had it together. Or the narrative on social media was the burnt out teacher of just the exhaustion. And that was what was being perpetuated. So I wanted to start something different. And that's what Happy Teacher Revolution was, but specifically with our social media presence and how we connected. I mean, it's crazy because I had my personal account. I deleted it for multiple years because of workplace bullying and harassment. So petty, right? And because of that, I focused on Happy Teacher Revolution. And it's crazy to think how much it's grown and how it started from this place of, just me, it's just like just me, a kindergarten teacher in West Baltimore. I'm going to log in and create an Instagram account and see what happens. And now, we're over 22,000 followers, and it's insane. Just the platform of building community and how technology can be used for something so positive and wonderful if we reframe it and switch that lens. So I just want to say thanks for sharing that because, that got me really emotional.
I was so happy when I saw like how much your account has grown, because I joined Instagram for my personal branding work like end of 2018. And I remember kind of your account then, and then when I kind of checked in again, I was just like, my goodness, I was like, I was so excited for you because it is so important. Because I love that you brought up Miss Honey from Matilda, because she was the picture perfect teacher, but she had some baggage, right? Like there were some personal pains in her life story, which I think is just like,
you're right. She was human.
She was human. And I think that's what we forget about our teachers. Right? Because we expect so much from them. We expect them to fix the bullshit the kids are facing at home. We want them to provide the best education at school. We want them to be fair to our kid and the other 30, 40 kids that they have in their class. And then they need to have everyone like there's so much on these teachers, and then we pay them shit for it. And we treat them like crap for it. Sorry, I'm gonna roll it back because I have a personal passion for this, and I think it's just too much. And so first, my podcast. I'm developing a space to just have conversations about things that matter to us all, and just provide different perspectives on it. Like my perspective is coming from like, a mother, a brown woman in America, Muslim and whatever. And then I invite, people like you who have expertise in a certain area that I want to talk about. And so it's through that discourse that we provide information, that I want to provide information and things for the audience to really think about that maybe they haven't thought about before. And I start each conversation with a ridiculous sounding question, but it's really the launch pad then for kind of the discussion that we want to have around this topic. And so for you, it's because just like teaching and teachers, it's just like always an important topic, but especially now because everything that's happening in the world and the impact that it's having on education and lack thereof, I thought that this was a very important topic to kind of resurface and discuss, and especially with the viewpoint that you're bringing from like that point of self-care and self-love for teachers. I think it's important for everyone to hear.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really, I mean, what is so fascinating and timely about this is that, we just wrapped up Teacher Appreciation Week. The month that we're in now is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I made a post just a couple days ago, interestingly enough, of an educator that tweeted that I reposted about this effect of teachers experiencing gaslighting or being made to feel like they're crazy or that this is all on them or everything that's wrong is because it's their fault. And it's like, hold on, time out, wait a second. What we're experiencing are the injustices and inequities of a broken system. Right. And these disparities are perpetuating in our homes, and we're seeing them in a new way, in a new light, but they're not the fault of our teachers. Our teachers are hustling, trying to figure this out because guess what? We were never taught how to teach during a pandemic, or we were never taught in our pre-service classes how to transition of all of our pedagogy and what we're used to deliver instruction and the means through which of delivering instruction completely being flipped on its head. And there were no praxis questions or test prep questions about how to best prepare to meet the demands of what our students require and need and crave, both in terms of academics, but also social emotional learning. So, and yet teachers are getting the brunt of everything. And this effect or phenomena, I think it's not the first time we're experiencing this, right? Because when we noticed the rise in school shootings, the solution that was pitched at the top by folks in charge was, let's arm our teachers. What? It's like, it's all of these things. So it's what happens is teachers become the default and our plates get piled higher and higher and higher, and the workload and weight feels heavier and heavier and heavier. And who can blame our educators for leaving? And what's happening is 50% of our teachers are leaving the classroom in the first 5 years. And these numbers and these statistics that I'm about to share in this data is all pre-COVID. So the stress and overwhelm from teachers leaving the classroom in these rates means that we're spending $7.3 billion every single year in teacher turnover to try and recruit and train new teachers over and over and over again. And in 2018, according to the U.S. Department of Labor statistics, more teachers left than ever before. So we had teachers leaving before a global pandemic. And now the research that's coming out about teacher stress and overwhelm, but more specifically, self-reported surveys around mental health, right? So teachers feeling depressed and anxious. And so what we also know from research is that when we measure the stress hormone that we call cortisol in our educators, our caregivers, our leaders, that teachers with higher levels of cortisol have students with higher levels of cortisol. So what I'm curious about also is this rise in stress, not only of our teachers, but of our students too. And so with Happy Teacher Revolution, this was very much a grassroots movement that was born by teachers for teachers right here in Baltimore, in classrooms and yoga studios and my grad school classes at Hopkins. And it really, it's not therapy because I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a licensed social worker or anything like that. There's no advice given necessarily. And it's not AA because you're allowed to drink afterwards, but we do sit in a circle and we connect and we share. And then we might have a glass of wine after for anyone who wants to. But anyway, in terms of what Happy Teacher Revolution actually is, it's a place for educators to gather together to feel that authentic human connection, to realize that we're more powerful when we're able to set boundaries, when we're able to celebrate self-care and self-love and those wins, when we're able to recognize and give each other a pat on the back when one another says no, or when one another like actually takes a sick day when they're sick instead of working and pushing through it, and recognizing each other for, you know, drinking water every day and getting 8 hours of sleep, right? Instead of perpetuating that narrative again, like what I mentioned before in terms of social media, this burnout of teachers burning the candle at both ends, because unfortunately, it felt like Teacher of the Year was an award that was given to educators who were performing at this level that was not sustainable long-term in the profession. And I think that's really what Happy Teacher Revolution is all about, is, you know, we want to provide educators with the time and space to heal, deal, and be real about the social, emotional, and the intellectual demands that they face on the job.
That's amazing. And before I actually jump in, I would formally like for you, in your own words, to introduce yourself and describe what it is that you want to be known for or what you do.
My name is Danna Thomas. I am an educator, entrepreneur, musician, and poet. And I want to be known for helping children all over the world by helping their teachers.
Oh, I love that. At some point, I am going to cry during this conversation.
I don't have any makeup or mascara on today, which I'm glad. I was just doing yoga right before this, so I'm glad I didn't get all dolled up, because I would have been even more of a hot mess.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to launch right into it with my ridiculous question, which is being a teacher a thankless job?
It is absolutely a thankful job. I think I get the most thanks as a teacher from the kiddos. I think it's a thankless job when it comes to some grown-ups, but from the students, that's where so much of my joy and like realizing the impact comes from. But I also, this is from the perspective of a kindergarten teacher. So I was getting hugs all day long. Even if they screamed at me and said I was a monster first thing in the morning, like by the end of the day, I love you, Miss Thomas. Oh, and then if they saw me after school, even if it was right after the bell rang and I'm just like outside by my car instead of in the, Miss Thomas, I'm like, you're so excited to see me, and I feel like so grateful that you're excited and thankful to see me, but you were just acting like some sort of something a couple hours ago in that classroom. So how about we follow directions from? So anyway, it feels like a thankless job. It felt like, honestly, when I first started teaching, I started in Southeast Asia. I taught English, conversational English, in 2 orphanages, and lived in Cambodia for a summer. And in Southeast Asia, the culture around education is so different than the US in terms of how teachers are seen and supported. And the teachers are held in such high esteem. It's like it's higher than doctors and lawyers, basically. And so I come in as, you know, I'm at the very end of my college career. I didn't necessarily think I would go into education, but this experience honestly transformed my life. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to be a teacher. But here's why. In Cambodia, when teachers walk into the classroom, it's customary for all the students to stand up, start applauding, standing ovation, and then a student would bring me a glass of water. And then the day would start. And I'm like, this teaching gig is great. I'm going to try this in Baltimore. And it wasn't the same. So but honestly, in so many ways, it was better, because it was such a blessing to be able to teach in Baltimore City Schools for 7 years and to work with so many incredible educators and families and folks in the community. And I learned so much about myself, but what I learned more of was the stress and demand placed on educators. Because really my inspiration for going into the classroom ultimately was the difference that my own teachers had on my life when I was a student. And when I was in high school and college, I suffered from crippling depression and anxiety and panic attacks. And I was really good at putting on the smiling face, like everything was okay. But deep down, like I was one of the people that wasn't okay. When you see those things that are like, check on your friends that seem like they're okay, because sometimes they are hurting too. I was one of those people, and the individuals who checked on me and who I consider my emotional first responders are my teachers. And so it was my teachers in high school and college who recognized those subtle changes in behavior as warning signs and encouraged me to get help and to seek treatment. And they, provided life-saving differentiation and accommodation for me academically when I was in crisis. And without them, I wouldn't be alive today. So they're the reason that I went into the classroom. And once I became a teacher, I was like, oh my gosh, they didn't prepare us for X, Y, and Z in terms of the emotional demands of the job. And also in terms of working with students who've experienced trauma firsthand. And trauma in a child's life can mean any number of things, whether it's losing a pet or losing a parent or moving neighborhoods, moving countries, experiencing a global pandemic or a natural disaster or witnessing an act of gun violence, any or all of the above, right? So I very much felt like teachers didn't have the opportunity to connect with one another and to also support their own self-care, mental health, and wellness, because if they're not taking care of themselves, they're not going to be able to recognize those subtleties in their kiddos.
Oh, so then my next question just seems so callous in the view of what you just shared with me, but we hear this proverb that those who can do and those who can't teach. What the hell is that?
I know, right? It's so funny because it's like, just because everyone was a student thinks that they can be a teacher, and it's just like, just because you went to the doctor doesn't mean that you can be a doctor. You know what I mean? And so, and teaching is the hardest thing in the whole world because it's the most rewarding, but it's so challenging because, gosh, humans are unpredictable, especially humans who are learning how to be humans can be somewhat unpredictable. But also, I think in terms of the content and the demands and how to prepare our little people to grow up to be big people who are ready for this world in terms of having the acumen of innovation and being a self-starter and grit and perseverance and, the technological advances that, like, how do we even prepare people for things that haven't even been invented yet, like 2 years from now? Right. But I think in terms of teaching, I mean, it needs to be an attractive profession because, first of all, we're losing teachers at an alarming rate. And I think that what's happening is our teachers, unfortunately, are on the cover of Time magazine for selling their blood plasma because they're not earning a living wage. And so our teachers are not esteemed nearly to the value that they deserve to be. And I also think that now, given the circumstances, so many of us are starting to experience a little glimmer or glimpse into the demands of being an educator. I think in terms of Happy Teacher Revolution, the language that we use, we say teacher is anyone who is in a relationship-intensive profession or caregiver relationship intensive capacity with that of a child. So we work with people and train individuals to lead Happy Teacher Revolution meetings who are bus drivers and nurses and school secretaries and veteran teachers and soon to be teachers, because I think what really it's all about is this idea of taking care of ourselves, taking care of one another, and seeing one another, supporting one another with a level of respect, I think, because really, like, what that quote reminds me of is just, teaching is it's the oldest and most esteemed profession there is, right? Like, there's influencers on YouTube and Instagram, but the OG influencers are teachers, they're right. Number one.
So you mentioned that your first teaching experience was when you were in Southeast Asia, and you quickly recognized the different value that is put on a teacher or a knowledge sharer there, right? I think of kind of sensei, that term, and it's a very revered term. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the difference? Why do we value our teachers the way we do here in the US versus the rest of the world, or even in like Eastern Asia?
I think there's a lot of politics behind the profession. I think specifically, like when we talk about the US, and even teaching right now is a predominantly female profession of white women. So 70% of teachers are white women. And I think, even in terms of training to be a kindergarten teacher, 50 years ago, or less. Part of the required classwork was to be able to play the piano for sing-alongs and things like that. And so it's just really interesting to think about too. And when you look back, there's some documents. My cousin was at this museum in Atlanta, Georgia, and there were documents about, I don't know if it was a union contract or just teacher agreements, that it had to be a single unmarried woman who was the teacher. And so there's, I think, so much in terms for us to unpack in terms of some of the gender inequities behind the profession, racial inequities behind the profession, the fact that only 2% of teachers are men of color, the fact that we're seeing higher burnout rates for our teachers of color, we're seeing higher burnout rates for our special educators as well. So I think there's a number of systemic injustices that play into that. And, you know, I also think that the demands of the job are shifting so much, and the teacher preparation has not kept up with those demands. And what I specifically mean by that is when we look back to what back to school time looked like for teachers 20 years ago, right? So teachers come to school and they convene in the building before the kiddos show up, and they might have a week to set up their classrooms and talk about, you know, the curriculum and plan for the year and things like that. Nowadays, when it's back to school time, well, who knows what it'll be going forward. But now, let's say in 2019, back to school teacher readiness and preparation included how to recognize signs of mental illness in your students, how to recognize signs of abuse and being a mandated reporter for Child Protective Services, and how to prepare for an armed shooter in lockdown drills going forward. So it's just like, whoa, there is very much, I think, such a need for our teachers to support their social emotional learning. What I mean by that is for our teachers themselves to develop relationship skills amongst each other, to develop self-awareness, social awareness, those types of things, because we can't model that to our students and support our students if we're not doing it ourselves.
So there are many stories. I know for me personally, there are stories where teachers have played an uplifting role in my life, but equal amounts of stories where people have also rooted their trauma back to an early teacher experience.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? Where
yes, big time.
People will say that, oh, I remember my teacher saying, I will amount to nothing. You know, we hear a lot of that. So both sides of the aisle. Can you help me understand that perspective where a teacher may say something like that? Like, I would love to understand the teacher's perspective. Where is she, most likely she, coming from?
That's such a great point that you bring up. And I think about the ripple effects that teachers have and what that looks like, depending if it's a happiness, joy, inspirational ripple effect a la Miss Honey, or if it's a ripple effect a la, what's her name? The church bull, the chokey, you know, the one who swings the girl by the pigtails, right? And you're absolutely right. And so I think in terms of Happy Teacher Revolution, from our perspective, you know, we're like, wait, time out. Where is the opportunity for people to step back and reflect internally about if they are perpetuating any traumas themselves of maybe something they experienced as a child and now they're the adult in this role? I think that, speaking from my own perspective, I was not the best version of Miss Thomas when I wasn't taking care of Danna. And when I wasn't taking care of Danna, there was times when I did not recognize Miss Thomas, and she would say and do things that I am ashamed of to this day. And like, even that happening was the source of moral distress of like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm not aligning to my morals or personal principles by the way that I'm acting or reacting to things. But if we go back to, okay, why am I acting and reacting to things in that way? Did I get a full night's rest? Did I actually eat breakfast that morning? Or did I just have some sugary coffee drink and now I've spiked? And then I didn't eat lunch because somebody called me in the office, and then a parent, you know, wanted to meet with me, and then I had to pick up the kiddos, and then someone threw up on themselves, and then there was a fire drill. And then, you know, it's sort of like, and when you look at it, you know, I think that is what it really boils down to for me as in the perspective of Happy Teacher Revolution, is like, especially when we work with children with trauma. So if a child has experienced trauma or is experiencing ongoing trauma, the best thing that we can do is to arrive at that relationship with patience and kindness and understanding and pre-forgiveness. So like this idea that like, it's not personal. This child did not wake up today just to like, oh, I'm going to get Miss Thomas real mad. I want to make her face turn red and I want to see if I can get her to yell. You know what I mean? Like that little child did not wake up trying to just irk on my nerves, who knows why or what reasons or, what they're walking through the building with, what had happened to them that morning or the night before. Maybe they saw something on the way to school or whatever the case may be. Or maybe it's the anniversary of something that happened 1 year ago that we don't even know about or whatever. So I realized that like the best thing I could do instead of staying up late and doing lesson plans and cutting things out and trying to do all the things perfectly and update my social media page and make sure whatever, it's like, the best thing I could do is take care of myself and just arrive in those moments with patience and kindness so that I didn't flip my lid. Because one of the things that we say in Happy Teacher Revolution is that an escalated grown-up cannot de-escalate a child. And so, the times where I think to myself all the time, like, I hope in that moment where I like wasn't taking care of myself and I popped off or I wasn't kind, that like that's not the one thing that kiddo remembers for the rest of their life about kindergarten and Miss Thomas, and chances are, when I asked them at the end of the year, what was your favorite part? What do you like about kindergarten? They're like, lunch. I'm like, oh, great. So I think, yeah, it really is, for me, I wonder, what is the job satisfaction of the teacher that might have said or done nasty things or like the ripple effect outward was negative? We want to give teachers permission to leave the profession if they are not finding joy and happiness in this work anymore. You have permission to leave, and so, and I think, that's really what we're all about, is helping folks reclaim their happiness and joy, and to find that spark again.
What you just described is something that you would think is intuitive to people, that it's hard to compartmentalize life, that for me, 8:00, I will stop being mom and I will now become worker B, employee ID number, blah, blah, blah. Aisha Iqbal at work. And then at 5:00, I will turn off worker B, da, 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 and then turn into mom again. It doesn't happen that way. We are who we are in everything we do throughout the day. And the point that you're making, which is so important, is that who we are in and out of the home, in and out of work, is so important to everything else that we're doing. So if we are unhappy, if the teacher is unhappy, Miss Thomas was unhappy about something at home, or Dana was unhappy about something at home, Miss Thomas is going to show up to work with some of that lingering, if not a lot of it lingering. So my question was going to be, why is self-care so important to teachers? And you've already answered that. It's because the consequences of them not taking care of themselves are much greater than many other roles out there in the world, because their ripple effect is so much greater. It's equivalent to a parent's ripple effect, right? Essentially, me as a mom, I'm handing my kid over to you to be a surrogate mom, like for the rest of the day until I pick them up. So the ripple effects are huge for what you do and your fellow teachers do, because you are unknowingly impacting so many lives in ways that you may not even know.
And for who knows how long.
Right?
Who knows if it's going to end up in a rap song later about my teacher, and there's some of my favorite of my hip hop playlist, you know what I mean? Because I'm like, yes, like take that, you know what I mean? Because I think I want to celebrate and uplift the teachers who are making a difference, but not necessarily in a way that is like unrealistic or unattainable from like a self-care sustainability standpoint. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's funny because I posted on Mother's Day a meme about, happy Mother's Day to all the teachers who were accidentally called mom. And I've been accidentally called mom all the time, and I would laugh, and that kiddo would just be like embarrassed and be like, oh man, did I just do that? And I'd be, oh man, I'm not your mom, I drive away at the end of the day, you know what I mean? But really we don't really drive away at the end of the day. Like we carry that with us. We drive home, we're thinking about it during dinner and all this. And if you or me, during the year that I founded Happy Teacher Revolution, it was when I had 39 kindergartners in my classroom in Southeast Baltimore. And I was tossing and turning at night trying to figure out, like, why isn't there class size limits? 39 seems wrong, and I can't believe there's size limits for daycares, but not kindergarten classrooms. And I have to teach them how to read. And, we don't even have enough chairs. Like, what do? I'm supposed to fundraise for another, it felt like it never ended. And so one of the affirmations that we use in Happy Teacher Revolution is I choose to disconnect and detach with love. So this idea of, setting that boundary of disconnecting and detaching from a place of love, to not carry it home or to not take it with you or feel like you have to hold it and carry it, to separate it from a place of love. Like, I love you so much that I need to disconnect and detach so I can be my fullest self tomorrow. And so it is really challenging, and it's easy for me to, I'm saying all this stuff as if I've mastered it. Oh my goodness. No, it's really challenging, especially given the present circumstances, that teachers have found that it has been this total upending of their lives, and this ability, they haven't been able to unsegment their lives, right? So now there isn't the commute from school to work or school to home anymore. It's just everything. There's no dining room table. The dining room table is the classroom. That's what one teacher told me recently, is my dining room table is my classroom. And so, now I think it's even more challenging, and even more of an importance of why teachers need something like Happy Teacher Revolution to help support their self-care and wellness.
We started talking about this earlier, but I want to revisit this because it was such a huge impact, not just on the country, but it's just like the gun violence and the mass shootings. How has that impacted teachers? And what is it that it's just like, it just makes no sense to me how overnight we think it's so easy, my perspective, just to say, okay, all teachers need to be armed. Or teachers start doing these safety drills where you're teaching kids how to hide in closets. And I mean, that stuff is just so trauma inducing. Everything about that is trauma inducing. So please talk to me about, like, what has this done for teachers, and what did you experience? What were you hearing? What were you seeing during that time?
So I include a photo in my presentations when I talk about trauma specifically, and different examples of what trauma could look like, whether it's a hurricane. I talk about the uprising in Baltimore with Freddie Gray when it was declared a state of emergency. I include a photo of my students that I had taken the day after. It was my students in Baltimore, but I had taken the photo a day after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And to be a kindergarten teacher during that time and to see those babies' faces on the news, and to know myself that I would go to work every day and take a bullet for every single one of those children in my classroom, no question. Like, teachers have always known they're first responders, but I believe it was that moment that the rest of the world realized that we're first responders, that teachers are first responders, principals are first responders, guidance counselors are first responders, that, like, I believe our children and our teachers deserve to be able to go to a place to safely learn and to know that they're safe. And it is gut-wrenching to know that our middle schoolers, our 12, 13-year-olds, don't know what school's like to not practice for an armed shooter. To them, it's like a fire drill. They don't know what it's like to not. It's crazy that they're the experts, actually. They have the most practice. And it's really sad when I think about when I moved classrooms, and the first thing I thought of when I walked into my new classroom to set up my classroom for the year with the bulletin board paper and all that, I'm looking to the cubbies and I think, oh, great, this is going to be great because the cubbies are tucked away from the windows. I can have a procedure where every kiddo goes to their cubby quickly and sits in it, so that way I know exactly who's missing when we were practicing for the armed shooters. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like, why is that something that even crosses my mind or that I have to consider as an educator? But it is. And it's something that our teachers face. And so I think I'm getting just like goosebumps just thinking about it, is that it's like, it's not just the time that it happens of the incident or the trauma, but it's like every time that it happens thereafter, and every time it's the anniversary of that day. And like every time we just think about, what our teachers are facing and what they're willing to sacrifice, it's like, we go into this knowing we're not going to get paid $1 million. We go into this knowing that we're probably not going to get all the awards and the certificates and the pats on the back. Like, we go into this knowing that we might lose our lives for someone else's child. And we do it because we love it. And unfortunately, there's so many people who go into this work for the right reasons and who are doing amazing things and changing lives every day. And like when you see an amazing teacher in action, it's magic. It's just pure magic. And it breaks my heart to think of all the great teachers who are walking away, and who can blame them.
What has been, have you done an analysis of kind of the reasons, the biggest reasons why teachers are leaving?
So the number one reason is pay. And that's about 20, I think it's 27% of teachers report like that being the highest reason. But right behind that at 19% is burnout. So the two biggest reasons teachers are considering leaving are low pay and high stress and burnout. And so with Happy Teacher Revolution, what we're aiming to do is to support teachers with both of those things. So at first I went into this like, okay, our teachers are burnt out, they're stressed out. I want them to feel less alone. Because when I was struggling with mental illness, like the hardest thing was feeling like I was all alone. And the most empowering thing was just knowing that like there's other people who've been there or who felt anxious too. And so really it was like this consciousness raising movement of like, inspired by the civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement. Like I was like, all right, we're gonna get together and be less alone. So that's how it started, was really addressing like the burnout factor. But I think what really was incredible was, when I decided to make the leap of working on Happy Teacher Revolution full time. I had taught for 7 years with Baltimore City Schools, and I was like, listen, I told my parents, I'm like, listen, I'm going to walk away from my tenured job and my health insurance and all these things because I have this idea. It's Happy Teacher Revolution. I think that this is the solution and answer to ways that teachers are really seeking support. And I became a full-time entrepreneur. And it was through the Johns Hopkins Social Innovation Lab, after winning the Hopkins Social Innovation Lab, that I realized like, it's not just burnout I can help teachers with, but I can also help them become entrepreneurs themselves and to earn income. And then they can use that income for their own self-care and wellness, to take care of themselves, because unfortunately they're not getting paid what they deserve. They're on the cover of Time magazine for selling their blood plasma because they're not earning a living wage. They have student loans. And our teachers are striking and they're doing as much advocacy as they can, but the system isn't changing fast enough. At least I don't think so. And so I wanted to create an avenue or a path for teachers to become entrepreneurial, to help lead these meetings, but also enroll more educators into the opportunity of leading these meetings and have the chance to actually generate a side hustle for themselves so that they can pour that money back into themselves and keep going.
So part of me thinks that why should they even have to do that? Why should they get a side hustle? But I think for someone who also has a side hustle, but thankfully I do have a job that does pay me well. I do the side hustle to fulfill my passions. And so it's from that perspective that I applaud the effort to help these teachers create their own side hustles, because yes, it's for monetary purposes, but there's a sense of empowerment that comes from that. There's a sense of fulfillment that comes from that. So if that they're feeling fulfilled in one area, they don't necessarily need to find that in their actual work. So it's just like a different kind of positivity that is imbued in everything that they do. So I'm so happy that you're doing that. I feel like every woman definitely should have a side hustle, just to kind of broaden and expand, her own horizons. But anyways, I would just keep talking about that. But
I totally agree with you. And I think the thing about teachers is that they volunteer themselves so much. They volunteer their time, they volunteer their money, they volunteer their energy. And I believe that part of the systemic injustices that have happened in terms of education equity in our country specifically, like we've taken advantage of teachers and their willingness to say yes to everything and to do it all and to be the default. And so, I'm advocating for teachers to actually be compensated for the work that they're doing. I think that's where the real power lies, is that our women, need to lean in and to recognize their worth for their time, and that's what I want to compensate them for, because I think that teachers have been too willing to volunteer themselves, and that it's been taken advantage of. And also, there's so many teachers like I was who were operating within a toxic system. Happy Teacher Revolution does work with large school districts and teacher prep programs and folks who are more visionary in terms of investing in teacher professional development to become pilot sites for us. But we're also working with teachers who are are trying to operate within a toxic and broken system, who might not have the support of their principal, or who might not have friends at work and who are getting bullied at work and delete their social media account. You know what I mean? So like we're trying to support folks from both ends in terms of the systemic change of like, how do we get happy teacher revolution in terms of support for every new teacher, whoever comes into this school district, but also like, how do we help teachers right now for Monday morning who are operating within a toxic or broken system, and compensate them both for the work they're doing.
Who's doing the bullying? Who's bullying teachers?
Right. So 80% of teachers actually report feeling bullied at work. It's that high. And an even higher amount have like witnessed it if they haven't experienced it. And so what those numbers tell me is that, you know, it's teachers against teacher crime a lot of times. Like, it's not just, you know, there's a lot of, there's great principals out there and great leadership and great administration, but there's also not so great. But there's also something that we're doing to each other. And so I think what's happening is that the bullying's happening because, here's my best guess, the data-driven obsession in education has dehumanized kids, but it's dehumanized teachers too. So if we're all just numbers, like, we want our grades to be higher than the other class, because even in some districts, at least the one that I was working in, like, our test scores determined our salaries, and not only our own test scores, but the test scores of other people in the building collectively determined like our salary and how much we got paid. Whether or not a child even came to school or not, it didn't matter. The test scores determined everything. And so it's like, it could become a potentially like very competitive environment amongst other teachers. You know, there could be different like shaming tactics going on in terms of like, oh, well, she leaves when the bell rings, she never stays late, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you know, the contract says this, so I'm going to do, you know, if I get it done at the end of the day, how come I don't get to go home? You know? So I think the bullying, gosh, I mean, I think there's workplace bullying that happens in all different types of professions, but I think in teaching, there's so many like loaded layers of it too, because I think we also, when we work with kiddos all day long, it can feel that we can be treated like children as teachers ourselves. You know, when we get called to the principal's office. I never got called to the principal's office as a kid. Ooh, I got called to the principal's office as a teacher. I was always the one that was, you know, but what do they call them? The ones, the whistleblower. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So yeah, so that's part of it too.
That is it. Yeah, I don't even know where to start, because when you were talking about the bullying, it made me think of kind of similar stories that we hear in the nursing profession, where nurses are also being bullied. Again, a different conversation for a different time. But I wanted to ask about environment and the rise of the digital age and digital making its way into the schoolrooms. How do you think having education become more digitized, how could that help teachers, if at all?
So one thing that we've noticed in Happy Teacher Revolution in terms of what we're doing becoming digitized, which actually we digitized in 2017. So, you know, this was something that we rolled out in terms of our online training and online support in 2017, because the number one benefit for me is access. So people can access these opportunities to help support their self-care, their wellness without the other like limitations. And so, you know, when I started Happy Teacher Revolution, it was very much like, okay, we're going to meet up, we're going to sit in the circle, this is how it goes, this is what we'll do. And when our first big piece of press came out in Education Week, that's when I heard from people all over the country, all over the world saying, hey, we want to start one of these meetings where our teachers are stressed out in California and Oregon and Tennessee and Canada and Australia and West Africa. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm teaching full time. How do I help these people? And the answer was going digital. So that has been really powerful, just in terms of not only folks accessing the opportunity, but also connecting with each other too. Like, how cool was it the first time when we gathered together as an online cohort to be like, oh my gosh, we're all launching these things where each of us are respectively, each of us have totally unique communities. Each of you are the experts within your own community. So how can you use this framework and adapt it and differentiate it to best support the folks where you are? And so that's the other thing too, is like equipping individuals to be the leaders and to initiate themselves, rather than me coming in pretending like I'm the expert of what their or why their teachers are stressed out and plopping it there and hoping it sticks, but really like equipping folks with the opportunity to roll this out without me having to go and fly out and they have to buy all this stuff and whatever, So for me, it has been all about access.
It's actually fascinating because that could still be applied in the classroom, right? Where if we're digitizing the coursework, the teacher then essentially becomes a facilitator rather than you have to learn this and you have to learn it this way. The child has the resources at their fingertip to go through the course as many times as they need, and then they go to their teachers to ask questions. So it's exactly what you just kind of described, where you're not out there teaching these workshops to these various people. You're giving access, and then you're just helping to guide along. So
we do both. Like we do the workshops too, but we've been able to adapt it based on what folks crave or want. Like some people do want the self-paced thing and they can go back and watch. And I think that, to me, like that, I really love that way. But I also like the idea of like accountability check-ins. And we've done that too, more like a live class, because I need somebody to like call me out every now and then and be like, hey, pay attention, And we also do the in-person when we were able to meet in person. We did the in-person, but that's also transitioning into a retreat, 2 to 3 day retreat for sites, rather than doing them in person, connecting digitally. So, yeah.
So what are today, the past couple of months, what's happening in the world, and even in the past year, right? But we talked about gun violence. What are the glaring messages that we are getting about our education system? And what do we need to do about it?
I think what is most glaring is the huge disparity in terms of the achievement gap. Just the kiddos who are able to access the technology and information to keep learning in this completely like shifted and upended version of education that we're in. I think some of the biggest things have been this idea of like what's not in our control. I think teachers feel really overwhelmed by all the things that's out of their control, whether it's like, this is the curriculum you have to use, or these are the things you have to do, and you got to make sure you do X, Y, and Z, and then you got to, watch all these videos, and you have to help the kids with the technology, but you also have to help the parents with the technology, and you have to help each other with the technology. And, I think it's this idea that like, this feeling that there's so much out of our control. And so with Happy Teacher Revolution, there's a number of things we incorporate in our meetings, whether there are choices, like I choose to be grateful, I choose to get outside and get moving. No matter how the school year started, I choose to finish well. We also very much are grounded in the research and a process of using affirmations at the end of our meeting. So things like, I'm proud of myself for, I recognize the courage it took for me to, or I'm grateful for, because I think what teachers are facing now specifically with the online learning is that like all the things they said, I had these Post-its all on my wall of like teacher quotes. Whenever I'm talking with teachers, I'll write little sound bites down. And one teacher says, all the things that suck about teaching have been drawn out. So it's like the best part is with the kids, right? Like that's what we love the most, is being with the kiddos. But it's like the things that suck are drawn out. So like, the assignments and following up about this and sending the email about that. It's like, oh man, like I just want to do my slime lesson and talk about the phases of the moon with the Oreos where we scoop out the icing, and so I think that's what has been really challenging for teachers. And also that like now I think there is a disconnect between some of the leadership and teachers in terms of, our educators have never gone through a pandemic before. They're trying to make it work. Some of them are parents themselves trying to make it work with their own kiddos. Some of them are taking care of elderly parents. Who knows if the virus has personally affected them or a loved one. But now I'm hearing from teachers that their principals are like, oh, what time is this and this? We're going to drop in and observe you. And we're going to give you feedback on this. And it's like, you didn't observe me all year, but now we're in a pandemic and you want to hop on my Zoom. Okay. And so that's another thing is also just, what are the expectations of teachers on Zoom? I've had teachers share with me that like parents expect the teacher to discipline their child. They drop their kid off in front of the computer and they're like, all right, I'm going to be out, so see you later. The teacher's like, what? Are you kidding? And I even had a friend who teaches in New Jersey. I'm not going to share her name, but her principal jumped on one of her Zooms or watched her video and gave her feedback that her hair needed to look better. And she looked like she rolled out of bed. And my girlfriend goes, she said she's divorced. My girlfriend goes, well, I'll show my principal. I'm going to wear my old wedding dress and put my hair extensions in. So the expectations is ridiculous, that's the kind of stuff I'm hearing.
I don't even know where to go.
I know. It's like, that's like, where do I even?
What the hell?
I know. I know.
Okay. So I'm glad that you kind of helped me segue into this next question. Me as a parent, what can I do to help you as a teacher as my child, starts going to school? Because you're right, that example that you gave, I'm just going to plop my kid down in front of Zoom and off you go. It's essentially, I'm treating you like a babysitter, right? But you're not. You are a teacher. So what are my responsibilities as a parent to my child and to you as my child is going through the education system?
Well, I think the number one is that, a parent is a child's first teacher. So that's number one. It's just like knowing that. And number two is that like we're all on the same team. So like teacher and parent wants kiddo to do well. Like we're all on the same team. And I think that concept was very different like 20 years ago, or at least like the way I was raised. It always seemed to me as the kiddo that like my teacher and my parent were on the same team, even if they weren't. Like my perception as a child was that they were. So I think that's really important, is the messaging between parent and teacher is that like we're on the same page. These are the assignments, these are the expectations, or this is what Miss or Mr. So-and-so expects. And this, and also I think for parent and teacher, for this to be like mutual, right? For like both of us to know that healing doesn't happen in isolation. We got to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first in order to take care of, kiddos and those around us. I think the other thing is that like boundaries are a good thing. So communicating to one another, like these are the hours I'm available and I'm happy to respond to your email. I'm not available after 8 p.m. on weekdays. I'm not going to be at my computer on weekends. This is a practice, and even explaining why, like I am not on my work email on the weekends because I believe that this will help me be, more in tune and a better educator come Monday morning. So I'm happy to reply then, so it's just sort of like setting like those, I guess, like the boundaries and expectations going forward. I think, the other piece of advice too would be just to hold one another with grace and kindness. There's two big things, like pre-forgiveness and assume the best, I think are really important. And just knowing that like no one has practiced in this before. We don't know how to do this, and we're all figuring this out together. And having those opportunities, I think too, like if there's any way to build in a routine when you do check in, like having a practice when you first have a parent-teacher call or conference or email, or just saying, offering up a positive thing or a piece of gratitude, or, answering a question around, what's one thing that you're grateful for, or something, just I think embedding opportunities for the social emotional learning, again, those pieces of like self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, because behind a screen, we can only do so much. And so when we are with that kiddo in person, whether it's come fall or who knows next year, when teachers have that opportunity, we're really just hoping that our parents right now with kiddos are fostering those social emotional learning skills. So that's really where we're at, like in terms of supporting like the emotional piece of things.
Right. I think, I mean, that advice is applicable even post or pre-pandemic, right? The social emotional learning there, because again, I hear stories, they're obviously great stories, but then the dark side of the stories is that parents come blaming the teachers, like if the kid isn't doing well or something like that. So, you know, and the kid picks that up too. So you come in, I mean, I grew up with, you don't question authority. So anytime the teacher said anything, my mom and dad were very much in line with that. Now there needs to be some balance there. It's okay to ask questions, but there's a way to do that in a way that you're respecting all parties. And that learning should come from an adult, or that teaching should come from an adult first. So Danna, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm glad that we were able to work through me crying, and I was unmuted when I was crying too. But thank you so much for your time today. And this is such an important conversation that I feel like I'm just going to forever follow your work and in your account. And I hope that you continue to grow and grow and grow and grow, because the work that you're doing is so important, not just for the teachers, but then all the kids that they're going to impact thereafter. And it's just, your work is definitely helping create a much better future generation for us.
Oh, thank you so much. I had such a fun time, and thank you so much for the questions and for your courage and vulnerability too, and sharing. And for anybody who's interested in checking out more about Happy Teacher Revolution, check out happyteacherrevolution.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Happy Teacher Revolution, and on Twitter we're at Happy Teacher HTR.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
And good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too. This was fun.
Bye.